In the next step, we want to hook up our backend to our front end, and so that we can get data from our server into our client. So we have our server running here on the left side, and so when I refresh this here, I get my text, my text object with Henning displayed in my browser, and then up here on the left side I have my client, which is my Quasar program. So with my pages, and here's my chart .view. So in the next step, what we want to do is we want to get this in data here, this data set. It's an array from our server, so that we don't have this as literals in our client, but instead get this from our server and ultimately from a database server. That makes the entire application, and of course, very flexible. So the next thing for this, in order to get there, what I want to do is I want to start my client. So I have my server already running, and in order to get and start my client, I open another terminal here in VS Code. And so first I need to cd into my client here, and then I start Quasar dev. So Quasar dev is booting up. This will open a client window here on my browser, and here's our application. So for the API, what I'm going to do now, what I'm going to do next is to open the developer console in Chrome, because we want to see what's going on. And there are a number of ways of doing this. The easiest way is, when you're new at this, you just go into the menu up here, you go into more tools, and there are the developer tools. And this will open up the window down here in Chrome. And so we see a Quasar running our single page application. So we can see what's going on here. So in our client, we want to do the API call now. And in order to do this, we create what's called a lifecycle hook. I recommend that you Google these things. When I say something that you don't understand or don't know, that you Google these things. So we create a lifecycle hook, and the lifecycle hook that we create is called mounted. Mounted. What this does is, when Vue loads this single page, single file component, the my chart.view, when it loads that into the DOM, it establishes the entire HTML part of that component. And when it's all ready, when it's almost ready to be displayed in the browser, then it goes through the mounted hook. It goes basically through this function here, which is called mounted, and executes whatever code's in there. So that's where we put our fetch command. Our fetch command is the JavaScript command for our API. So we say fetch here, and then we add our URL, which is http://localhost at port 3000, and then /API. That is the URL that we have used here in our when we did this all in our sandbox here. And so you see already that I'm getting a bunch of error messages, and we'll get to that in a moment. So then I want to, once that fetch call is basically, this creates a get call towards the server, and that will return something. And so I will put this on a new line, which goes with then, and then we have a response coming back, and we need to format that response into JSON, response JSON, and then we have a second then, as in the next step we do a response, and here we create a callback function, and we console log this out. Response. Okay. So this is our API, the fetch command. This is our API that we are running in this lifecycle hook mounted. And so when I reload the page, you see that I'm getting an error. And this error says access to fetch at, then our address, our URL, from origin. Localhost 8080 has been blocked by course policy. No access control allow origin header is present on the requested resource. So there's a problem, there's an error here. And the issue is that the data is fetched from a location 8080. That's basically our URL up here, 8080. So we are fetching data from port 8080 going to port 3000, and that's not allowed. That's a security thing. It's a security policy that is built into every browser, and so this is not allowed. In order to, as a standard, so in order to make this error go away, we have to implement something on the server side, so that the server then accepts the request from a different source, meaning from 8080. So the server, as we know, runs on port 3000, and so that the server will accept a request that comes in from port 8080. That's why we need this function, what's called a course module. So all right, let's go into our API.js. So here's our server, and I go into our server terminal. So here's our server running, and so I stop the server for a moment, and here now I install our course module. So I say npm install course. That's all I say, all I do. And so this installs functionality that will allow us to get through this error. So it is now installed, and I restart our server with npm run dev. So make the server run again. And so in our API up here, the first thing I need to do is I create a constant here, constant course require course. So it closes out with a semicolon, and then I open this whole thing up underneath here. Actually, not here. I make this one up here, and this line. So here I say up, because we just defined app, and say use, and say here course, and then we open this up again here with a first with a parentheses and then with a curly brace, and then in here we say origin. We create basically an object that we pass into the course functionality origin. So we have to spell this, of course, correct. The colon, and here we say star. Star means any destination. So it doesn't matter where the request comes from. It will accept all incoming requests. Okay, and so let's see whether this works. So when I refresh this, then you see the error has gone away, and now we see in our console log the data, basically, that we already saw up here, coming into our component here, into our MyChart component. So what you're seeing down here in the developer console is exactly this console log here. This statement. This is what you're seeing. So in the next step, as I said, we want to put the data that we have here into our backend. So I copy the data definition and the array, copy this and put this into our, where I have my other test data here. So I just copy this here, put this right in here, and then I go back into my chart and just take the array out and replace that with a null value. So it's just null, which means it's not really defined. And so then down here in my API, I now need to get the data that comes through the response object into my variable that I defined that currently has the value null. So I do this by pointing this. This means that I address the variable that is part of the object here, and this is called chart data, and I point this to response chart data because that's what it's also called on the other side. And you can see already the chart shows up here. So when I refresh the screen, then I have the chart here, and you can see here with the console log that the data is coming in. So exactly as we defined it here in the back end. And just to demonstrate, I can just change this. If I change the red column here on the right side, which is currently 1400, I remove 1000, so it's only 400, and I refresh this here, then it's reflected in the is reflected, error refused. So what went wrong? Actually, nothing went wrong. What I didn't realize when I refreshed the client was that the server wasn't completely running yet. So it was still recompiling, and you could see this in the terminal actually, that while I kept hitting refresh button, the server wasn't running yet. So there was not the white message server running on port 3000 was still missing. That's why it didn't work. So again, when I make a change here, let's say I changed it 200 to 1200 here, and now it recompiles, and this time I watch this here, wait until really the white message is here, and I now hit the refresh button, then you see that our yellow bar went all the way up to 1200. So that's it. So now we have a client server application running that pulls data from the backend. And so then the next step that we want to do is to put this data actually into a database, so that we add a third tier that we have with that, what we call a full stack up and running.